Timmy Long, James Leonard of the Two Norries podcast. Hello, gents. How are we?
How's the farm, Dave?
Very good. Pleasure to get to chat to you ahead of your Changing the Conversation tour at Cork Opera House, 12th of February, Saturday, 12th of February. You've Pat Falvey in conversation. You're up on around 90 episodes of a podcast that I not only keep hearing about, but have delved into a number of the episodes. And I can see why you guys have kind of turned into a bit of a phenomenon, whether you like to think of that term or not. You've had the Taoiseach on, Micheál Martin, John Creedon, Doireann O'Mahony, who made her story as spoken to you, made the front of the Examiner in recent weeks. And you're about open, honest conversation around a range of subjects, and you use your own difficult life experiences that you've shared in podcasts 1, 2, and 3. Timmy, yours, well, I suppose your part 1 for you, James, was on the Tommy Tiernan show. So we got part 2 in episode 3, and Timmy, yours was split over 1 and 2, and 1 was the tough side of the story, and 2 was the recovery side. And I've yet to hear that bit, but I mean, wow, they're you guys went through a lot, but the point about it is that you went through it and you found recovery, and it's a little bit of opening changing the conversation. Why don't we just start with what that term means for the both of you?
Yeah, well, myself and Timmy have come through addiction and kind of a negative life to go on through education and to have good lives today and to be healthy, happy people and, have full lives, I suppose. But it's not so common for people to share their experiences of addiction and mental health, because there's shame attached to it. There are sometimes taboos. So what we wanted to do with the Change in the Conversation tour, which is just one show now because of COVID, but it was around like having open and honest conversations and discussions on these topics that affect all of us, but that all of us are not so comfortable talking about. So if you look at the moment, like we've been around for the last, I'd say 18 to 20 months, and we've done 90 podcasts, 88 podcasts published and a couple of lives. At the moment, we're #1 podcast in Ireland for mental health, and we're the #1 podcast in Ireland in the health and fitness genres on Apple. In the top 10 mental health, we've got 4 episodes, and in the top 10 health and fitness, we've got 2. And in those episodes, you have people sharing their experience of domestic violence and coercive control, sharing their knowledge on sexual violence, with a world-renowned psychiatrist sharing his knowledge on how trauma affects the body and how we can recover. We had the Taoiseach on a couple of weeks ago, giving his experience of bereavement of his kids and how he got through that. So the fact that these podcasts are trending and there's thousands of people accessing them just goes to show that these issues affect a lot of people, a lot more than people actually speak about. So we were happy to kind of make ourselves vulnerable and put ourselves out there. And that allows our guests then to kind of feel comfortable in our company and to relax and then to be more open,
Yes, and there's clearly an appetite for it. We tried to have this conversation previously, the 3 of us, and unfortunately James had some internet issues, but yourself and myself, Timmy, had I really enjoyed the conversation and where we went with it, and I'll pick up on some of those bits. And with any luck, if anyone's watching this on the redfm.ie website, they'll be able to click on the link to hear the audio of the convo yourself and myself had, Timmy. But we spoke about how, actually, I picked up on something that I heard in episode 1 where, Timmy, you were telling your story, and you guys are from the same neighbourhood in Ardmore, is it, up in Naka? James, Ardcullen, excuse me. James, you came down from Dublin originally. Yeah. Your mum was getting you out of Dublin to I suppose, escape some of the social difficulties that were occurring there, particularly around heroin. And I don't know if it was quite out of the frying pan into the fire, but it maybe wasn't. But you shared your experiences of growing up. But one of the things that really stuck out for me, maybe Timmy, and I'll bring it over to you, is just that thing of you spoke about how, no guards lived in where we live, no nurses, no one of that echelon of just like your role models were missing. And what I was suggesting to you, Timmy, is that the beauty of what yourself and James are doing in both offering your vulnerability and your honesty and opening that space for others to share in a similar way is actually offering a different kind of a role model that I would think there is an appetite for, that people can drop the mask a little bit more often. Because it's all right, you can have your muscles and your tattoos and you can act a bit of the boy, but it maybe is okay to also say, yeah, I cry sometimes, and sometimes I find things difficult. and maybe I needed a little bit of help, because we all do.
Most definitely. Yeah, as you said, they're growing up for myself and James. Role models weren't there. Good role models weren't there. So the ones we did see, you know, I was uneducated as well, you know, and there was no possibilities of me going on to be a teacher or an accountant or a lawyer or any of these things, you know, anything at all, going into a management course, or anything like that. So basically, growing up, our role models were like, you see people on the streets. We grew up very poor in my family household. We had nothing, basically, we had nothing, and that's the reality of it. And when you see guys out in the streets and they're wearing nice clothes, jewelry, they're getting a lot of respect from other people in the area because of who they are and what they do. They were our role models, and those guys were involved in drugs, involved in criminality, involved in, they would have went to prison, you know, and I like this because I see the respect they got, and I wanted some of it because I grew up with a single parent as a mother. There was no father figure in the family home, and in the 80s, it was still looked upon as something very, very different for somebody, a mother, to be bringing up kids on her own, you know, and no father there. So I had to fight my own battles, you know. There was a lot of shit went down, a lot of bullying, whatever else. And I see a way out of that. I see a way out of being that victim consistently. I see a way out, and that way out was maybe getting involved in criminality, getting involved in drugs, getting strong, physically bigger, you know. Even though deep down within me, I believed, I still knew that all these things were not who I was supposed to be as a human being, you know. But I still had to do them because I needed to survive my surroundings and my environment, and that was critical. So that was basically how it was growing up. I absolutely knew no better. I did never, like, when I first came across the understanding that there was a different life to the life that I had before, I believed there was more changing in my life. I thought I would have to be involved in crime for the rest of my life to be able to support myself and my family. You know, I never thought I'd be able to get an education. All these things were beyond my understanding, my capabilities, my dreams. You know, I never, ever saw myself of becoming something like I am today, because it was just not part of my reality. It was never taught to me. I never believed in anything else like that. Like, what I wanted to be was a successful drug dealer. How crazy does that sound? You know, but that was my mentality. You know, always wanting to be the best at something, but like, you could be the best doctor, you could be the best lawyer, you could be the best soccer player. But how fucked up is that mentality when somebody believes they want to be the best at crime or robbing, or because that's all we knew. That was my environment. I knew no different than that. I knew no other way to be able to support myself and my drug habits, my gambling habit, my drink habit.
Is there anything could have come along at a point in your life, in your earlier life? I mean, maybe it's a range of supports that are needed in you know, throughout the community and throughout wider society, as a young person like you back then would have experienced it. I mean, maybe it's a helping hand. Maybe it is a father figure who's able to put you on a better path, maybe. But you know, it takes a village to raise a child, they say. You know, it takes, like, sometimes we break down these family units into too small. It needs a wider input of people and a wider range of potential role models or helping hands. I mean, were they available for you? Did you reject them, or what do you think there could have been something back then, somewhere along the way, that might have just steered you on a slightly better path, and you'd love that to be there for kids today?
Well, number one, I think if there was something there in primary school, like say a counsellor, that was trained to look out for kids that are being neglected or abused at home, or kids that have different learning differences like dyslexia, dyspraxia, and all these other things, maybe autism. Like if these things were picked up in schools at a young age, how different would my life have been? You know, instead of me being kept at the back of the class because I was known as disruptive, because I couldn't understand what the teacher was saying because I was severely dyslexic. You know, if I got the right help back then, if I got the counselling I may have needed back then, you know, because of the trauma that was going on at home, you know, the mental health issues that were going on with our family environment, you know, as a circle, maybe things could have been changed. Maybe my core beliefs about me, that I was no good, that I was stupid, that I'd never amount to anything, you know, would be different, and I could have went on and I could be that doctor, I could be that solicitor, I could be that teacher, I could be that shopkeeper, you know. I never even seen myself in that role, the shopkeeper role. I think I actually done well by getting a trade, some form of a trade, you know, and that's a success story for me alone, even for somebody that came from where we did, and they actually started a trade. No, I never finished it because I wasn't able, intellectually, I wasn't able because I hadn't got the education knowledge, and you know, it just wasn't there. Sorry, no, I'm just in the middle of a pub beer garden there doing this interview there. And just walk past me, so they don't notice. But yeah, maybe if my circumstances were different in terms of if there was people around me in schools and stuff. No, I know today, in today's day, 2022, that schools have a lot of these. I think they have AIM, which is they look after kids, they catch things at an early age, but we're still lacking resources in other areas where we need more educational psychologists going into schools and working with kids and giving them diagnosis before they really go into secondary.
So it's like it's interventions, isn't it? It's early interventions. Is one part of a potential answer towards how can we help kids who could end up with stories like you two guys have, and they're tough stories. James, I know you in the podcast, you talk about, you know, like the socio-economic aspects of it. You kind of have, because you've gone on and you've educated yourself to a pretty high degree. I think you might be en route towards a PhD at this point, generally in criminology and that sort of area. So how do you see those aspects in what you might call, and it's an unfortunate term because is there a better term than disadvantaged communities? Does that almost create a sense of victimhood if you call places disadvantaged communities?
I think marginalised is probably a more accurate description. And you said something there a while ago, Dave, and you were absolutely correct. Like, we can focus on the family unit and the individual all we want, but it does take a village to raise a child. And like, we had a doctor.
Hope it all went well for him in there. Timmy, will you throw us on mute just for a second and jump in anytime you want? We tried this before and it was James, we couldn't get the great connection with you, and now it's a slightly poor one with you, Timmy, but thank you for that. Go on.
Yeah, what I was saying, we had Dr. Sharon Lambert on the podcast a couple of times, psychologist from UCC, and she spoke to us, but what she said was, like, in psychology in general and in social services, we tend to look at the individual and the family as like all the traumas and that happen in there, it's their problem, let's fix them. But there's huge structural forces at play that impact on how things work out for that individual and that family, you know. And you can look at, like, myself and Timmy, we made some very bad choices and bad decisions that we regret for, have atoned for, and still do to this day, you know, try to make amends for those things. But at the same time, we weren't dealt a whole load of choices either, you know what I mean? It was always like, pick your poison, you know. But like, if you have an area like where we're from, where it's just all social housing, you know, high ratio of lone parents, high rates of unemployment, you know, even in where we're from as well. For all the positives that's up there, has some of the lowest rates of educational attainment in the country, you know, has the highest rates of deprivation, according to the CAO, you know, so like, it's not a coincidence that people from areas where high deprivation exists tend to populate the prisons.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
the connections are easy to make. I remember at one point in the past, I don't know if it's the case now, but I remember reading something like 7 of the 11 most, again, apologies if these are the incorrect terms or unfortunate terms that maybe we need to look at and change, but 7 out of 11 of the state's most disadvantaged communities were in Cork's Northside.
It's true, and like, don't be getting caught up on language. I think if your intention is good, then don't be, because
but you know, but sometimes you can almost reinforce things, you know, like maybe people start to believe, well, I'm disadvantaged, and because you want to empower people, actually. And what you guys, the two of you, do is first of all, I think, show people that it's it's okay not to be okay, which is potentially becoming a cliched term, but certainly it's okay to be honest and open and express vulnerability and the need for help, I guess, and assistance, and you know, a willingness to admit to need, almost admit to need.
Exactly. And the most important part of the podcast is that there is always a way out of the bad times, whether it's through you've been sexually assaulted, or you're poor, or you've had cancer, or neglect, or prison, or addiction, or mental health. There's always a route out of that, and there's always steps and things you can do to help better your situation. And that's the big focus of the podcast. It's nearly always starts with somebody who's been through a difficult time, whatever it is, but now they're here, and what was that process like? So then people can watch it from the comfort of their home. And then we're signposting help all the time. We're highlighting supports and things they can do, you know. So it's a great service for the people, and we get feedback all the time. Myself and Timmy around, you know, from followers. Or I listened to this podcast and then I did this, and now this has helped me in this way, and thank you, you know. So that's great.
Let's bring Timmy in now, just in case you get bored there sitting in the pub. But Timmy, you spoke about Pat Falvey, who's going to speak in the podcast. In the tour, the Changing the Conversation tour at Cork Opera on the 12th of February. Some people may well be watching this post the event, but I'm sure it won't be your only one. And I know you've done a couple of live podcasts. In Clare, I think, was one of them, but the other one was probably part of the Midsummer Festival up on Barrack Street, Elizabeth Fort, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How strange is it an experience to do it in front of actually a live audience? You know, you get to have the chats and you have people in and you film it and it goes out as a podcast, but now there's flesh and blood in front of you, cheering and clapping and stuff. And
we probably won't really know that on Saturday night, you know, but we're really, really buzzing for it. You know, everybody that's going to be there has followed and been with us along this journey in the last nearly 2 years since we started the podcast. Every single one of them have been there, and we've got comments back from a lot of people saying how it has helped them and how certain guests helped them to move forward with something that was going on in their life. And Pat Falvey has one of these stories of, it has absolutely everything in it. You know, it has absolutely everything in it, where he'll be talking about his own poor mental health and how he was able to get his life back on track by becoming an explorer, and how he then went down and became successful in a different area outside of construction. And he's now a mentor, a coach, an author. He wrote 7 books, you know, and he's just one of these people that genuinely just wants to help people move on and understand that they're not limited to the life they have now. There's more to it, and they can become absolutely anything they want if they put their mind to it and make action. Just go for it. And what he's going to bring to the Opera House on Saturday night is all of that. He's going to bring tears, laughter, he's going to bring inspiration, all these different things. So people people are going to be blown away by his story, but they're also going to be blown away when they walk away and they just feel how inspired they are to go on and just take that next step to whatever they want in their own lives. What dreams have they got? What do they want to do? We're not limited to our surroundings and our environments. We're more than that. We just have to think about it, dream about it, and go for
people
it.
need assistance and intervention and structures that can help them, but also they can empower themselves. It's a two-way street. You help yourself and others can help you. Is that a fair way to describe a little bit of the balance there of some of what people need to do? Because I definitely think people can often lack faith in themselves, and getting them to find that faith in themselves and trust in themselves is presumably part of what recovery is about. I'll leave that open to either of you.
Yeah. You have to break that belief, firstly, that you're bound to what you have in your life. You have to break that. And if you have a dream to go on and own your own home, or to go on and own your own company, or be successful, or be a musician and be number one in the charts, what's stopping us is our beliefs, our core beliefs that we developed as young children, maybe in school or in the family environment or whatever it may be. And they're the things that we need to break. They're the things that are stopping us from going forward and becoming what we really, really dream and want to be. So that's what it really is. You have to just believe that there's something else there, but you also have to educate yourself around this stuff. You just cannot just do it. You have to educate yourself around maybe attracting more positivity, even if it's a health thing. If you want to become more healthier in your life and just go to the gym, these are all things you just have to make that decision. Firstly, write it down, start it, make a program, and just go for it. And then every time where, like for example, I have a pattern where I get to a certain level, I stop. You have to break through that little barrier or wall that you hit and move on to the next level. And that's when the success comes. That's when the magic happens, is when you just break through that. And that's what it's about. And that's what we're going to be talking about as well. It's about just getting or thinking outside of that box and just having a little bit of belief in yourself and just continuing with the educational stuff around that area and just moving forward. And that's very, very important, Dave, that we understand the process of this stuff as well. You know, that we understand that we're not limited. We're limiting ourselves in life because of our past situations and experiences and influences from other people. We're limited because of that. But the reality of it is, we're not. If we dream big, we can go for those dreams and we will get them. We will get them if we can just keep the blinkers on in life and just move towards them instead of just consistently leaving things come in, problems and everything else come in and stop us from going forward and becoming what we truly, truly believe we should be.
True, but I also would say that like a success is what the two of you guys have done, which is like living through honesty, living through authenticity. You know, we may have dreams to be X, Y, or Z. They may or may not be realizable. You know, maybe the dream to be the president of the United States, it might not gonna, but actually, like, you know, being a solid human being is success. And no more, no, you know, it doesn't need that much. Sometimes it doesn't need bells and whistles. Like, move forward in things, go for dreams, but equally recognize that just, you know, being a friend, being a good friend to yourself and to your nearest and dearest is success as well.
Yeah, for me anyway, and a lot of people I work with in drug and alcohol service, because when things are so bad, all people want is a bit of normality. That's what, like, this stuff I dreamed of, it was more of a fantasy, like when you're in the throes of heroin addiction and you're in and out of prison. The thought of having a stable job with a stable wife and owning your own home and driving a good car, these are fantasies because you're so far away from them. But they're all very achievable goals. Like, if you want to get married and if you want to have a job and if you want to buy a car, and, you know, like, it's not Lamborghinis we're looking for or Playboy mansions or anything like that. These are realistic and very achievable goals. But when you're going through a tough time, it's not that you want the Ferrari, the Lamborghini and the mansion. All you want is a bit of normality. And what we try to show people, that me and Timmy we're nothing special. We're only couple of fellas from Cork City. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's all anybody is. If sometimes when you boil it down, the president of the United States or anyone else.
Yeah, even Micheál Martin said to us, like, and when we met Micheál, you know, he's the Taoiseach and he's got a huge profile and a huge remit, but he's just a Turner's Cross lad. And when you're talking to him, it's just
a teacher from Turner's Cross.
And he said to me, he says, all any of us are is just regular people. And we try to show people that you don't have to be super special to go on and do good things. You know, you can still have a good life and be a good person, just have realistic goals. And like me and Timmy didn't get to where we are by sitting on our backsides either, you know. You can have a good life, but it's not going to come knocking on your door. Yes.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You still have to work for that. I hear what you're saying too, Timmy, is almost like you manifest the life that you want. Like if health is what you're interested in and your own health, move towards that. Surround yourself with things that are healthy, and it follows in that fashion.
Yeah, I remember when I started on my own journey of what I really, really wanted in my own life. And today, the most important thing in my own life is how I feel about me, my own mental health. It's about how I believe that negative self-critical mind, when it comes in, you know, that will attack me in certain ways. Like when I was really at my lowest and I woke up every single morning wanting to take my own life because I could not live, because I was in so much pain, because I didn't understand anything about life or who I was or any of this other stuff, and I was riddled with guilt and shame and trauma and fear because of everything that went down in my life. All I ever wanted was peace in my life. I used to meditate and visualize myself as a person that was very happy, that was an extrovert instead of the introvert that I was all my life. And I just kept doing that and visualizing myself walking down that corridor inside the college saying hi to people instead of having my head down all the time and having an angry kind of demeanor because of the way I was. And I kept visualizing, and just one day I walked into the college, unbeknown to myself, I walked down that corridor, my head was high, I was smiling and I was saying hi to everyone. And it was like the eureka, it was just like a moment. And that's when I believe seeing myself really, really starting to get well in myself and get better, and things started to change. I stopped waking up every morning wanting to, just wondering what's the whole point, you know. And now it rarely happens. I still have a tough day, but I accept the tough days for being a tough day. You know, I don't fight all these feelings that I don't understand anymore. I just surrender into them. I feel whatever it is. It could be crippling me some stages. Sometimes it might be fear or guilt or shame, and it could be really strong. And it's like I don't even know where it's coming from, but it's coming from somewhere. But I don't fight these things anymore because I would have fought everything in my lifetime because that's all I ever knew.
Well, when you describe that amount of sort of negativity going on, and it's a testament that you're able to actually come through all of that. That is a lot of stuff. That would need help for people to help you unravel all of that, which presumably you got. But that's something I picked up from both of your stories on the podcast when I heard them, was just the level of chaos. And you know, we don't put ourselves in chaos. We can find ourselves in chaos. As you said something interesting too, Timmy, but I'll kind of move, I'll get James in on this as well. But in the convo that we had previously, you know, you talked about, we talked about men and how men need to change conversation, or men need to talk amongst themselves and refigure out, you know, almost maybe we need to sit down and re-agree. Let's agree what it means to be a man, and let's get this document together and we can all look it over and kind of, you know, because we probably need a bit of a reset button on what it is to be a man. But sorry, that was a slight sideline. You talked about a young person can meet with trauma at some point in their life, and it could be any number of things, and development ceases. And I think by that you probably meant emotional development, and it might be as a result of coming into contact with substances. And it's like men particularly, and possibly because of how men are with each other and not really able or even facilitated to open in the way that you guys, I think, are helping to shift. People are crippled. Like they have an emotional disability. They have an inability to navigate the world in an emotion with the emotional aspect, and it's crippling, and it's hard to navigate. Like, how do you navigate the world if your maturity has stunted, and you don't know where to go? And I guess that's what the work that you do now, James. If I could maybe tap into a little bit of that, what it is you do, and when you work with people that are in those sorts of situations that both of you have come out of, what's it like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you're talking about the men there, because men mainly make up, like, the prison populations in Ireland is mainly men. People in homeless services, drug and alcohol services tend to be overwhelmingly men. And there is issues around men, masculinity, and all these things, and the pressures that we all feel. But men did negative life outcomes are difficult. But it's hard to, like you said, it's up to us now, or maybe we should have a conversation, redefine what a man is. We spoke around with Mary Crilly from the Sexual Violence Centre around, like sending and sharing WhatsApps, pornography, how we speak about women. Maybe it's a time that, like, we need to kind of review what we're doing and think about it in the context of our daughters and our mothers and our aunts and our sisters, also around, like, bottling up emotions. And like, back in the day, my idea of what a man was he took drugs, slept with women, and didn't work. That was my idea of, like, if I did that, I was cool. But now I know, like, I've come to the realization that a real man, he'll do a day's work, he'll look after his family, he'll try not to hurt anybody along the way, and he'll contribute to society in a meaningful way, and that takes a lot of pressure as well, like, growing up for me, in that kind of toxic masculine environment. I felt I had to be a certain way, but then through recovery and therapy and all these things, then you get a little bit of self-acceptance, and you say, do you know what, there was parts of me that I resented, but now I accept them, and it's okay to be me, and I don't have to always be tough, and things do affect me, and things do hurt me, and that's okay. As Timmy said, like, we'll all get hurt at some stage, and we'll all get knocked back, but that's okay. It happens to us all, but we'll drive on. It doesn't have to be catastrophic. But in contemporary society, if we can say that, it's the idea that a man gets his head down and drives on. And we had an English guy on the podcast, Josh, and Josh Conley spoke to us about resilience, and he said the idea that resilience is, no matter what happens, you never complain and you keep your head down. And he says that's not resilience, that's self-harm. Resilience is being able to put your hand up and say, I actually need help, and then working through it. That's resilience. And I think that's what we need to send out the message, that resilience is not getting your head down, saying nothing and driving on. Resilience is putting your hand up, talking to someone, seeking help, and working through it that way.
And even suggesting that real strength is admitting weakness.
Exactly.
There's something powerful in that.
Exactly,
and empathizing with others in a similar situation, and women, we spoke, Timmy and myself mentioned that, how women seem to be better set up for enabling each other to and they have their own things, and the women's world is different to a man's world and whatever else, but they just, there's more of a willingness and an understanding almost implicit amongst females that it's okay to speak about things that are affecting them, and they get support from each other. I think us men need to do a lot more like that. Like it's okay to be strong, it's okay to have muscles and tats and be a bit of the boy and act tough, but understand that that's not all the story. That's only half the story.
It's true. And if you think of all the issues that a man will face, if a man is unemployed, or if a man is in prison, or a man is in addiction, or if you're a woman with them same circumstances, it's worse. Like, we have privilege of being males. Do you know what I mean? Like, we dominate all industries, most industries, and there's this thing in sociology called intersectionality. And if you have all these issues but you're a white male, it's better than having all those issues and being a female. The same way, if you're a female with all those issues and you're a traveller, it's worse. Or if you're a female with all those issues and you're black, it's worse. Or if you're disabled, these things are compounded. So as being men, we have more of an advantage. But if you're like, and I go back to my criminology and my experience of prisons and working with people from prisons and stuff, if a man goes to prison, in general, the partner will rally around them. She'll support the kids. She'll make sure the home is looked after. She'll bring them up trainers and runners and money for his tobacco and his toiletries or whatever. When the woman goes to prison, them kids go into care. And the man is not bringing her up Air Max or money for her tobacco or anything like that. So the same situation, but it's way worse when you're a woman. And that's just one example.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, and it's like it's not expected for the man to be a care giver.
And the shame is put on the woman, or she couldn't look after her kids, or look at her, she's in prison.
There's an unfairness there, but it almost speaks almost of like roles that are not even like it's when I say implicitly, I mean like no one actually says this out loud, but men take on these roles. But actually within it is a lot of pressure that men probably feel to be certain things, and that pressure doesn't exist. It doesn't have to exist.
No, it's just as you said, it's just there, and you know it's an unspoken kind of a false truth, really. Or at the idea that a man can sleep around and kind of not look after his kids, and he's kind of, or that's just the way he is. But if a woman did that, that would be total taboo, you know.
Yeah, you're right. I suppose for a woman, you know, for her not to be able to care, you know, is a major failing. And for a man, it's like if he's not able to provide. But their roles are wider than that, and they need to be better shared and better mixed.
I think we're getting better at it.
Yeah,
I think we're getting better at it. Like I know a good few stay-at-home dads, and it's just like in society today where, you know, mortgages and rents are high. You need sometimes two earners, but especially the main earner out working. So like if the woman is earning more money, then the man will stay at home and look after the kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't always have to be the man, you know.
Yeah, it's like and men have been more enabled in recent generations to be more involved in their, like men from my father's generation, I think, like whether they wanted it or not, we'll never know, because they never spoke about it, because they weren't in any way, they didn't have the language to even speak about it. And that's what you guys are doing as well in this change in the conversation. You're increasing the amount of discussion about these sorts of things and increasing the language around these sorts of issues for men, because it's not just for men, obviously. I mean, your podcast will deal with all sorts of issues, and we Tyrone O'Mahony, a barrister who spoke of her story openly and honestly, and as I mentioned at the start of this, that made the front of the Irish Examiner. So it isn't that it's a male-focused podcast, but I think there is and I get what you mean about the intersectionality and how, you know, as a white privileged male, you've had a lot of advantages in life, but equally then also you see some of the things that are happening, and you know, some awful stories, and it isn't all men, but it is still men, and I think men need to have a chat amongst men.
Yeah.
And to sort of say, lads, well, what is this? Do we you know, rewrite the document here and make it and have it better in a sense where there's less pressure on men, where we're more able to be vulnerable and honest with our emotions, and I don't know. I think it could be a benefit. The sort of people that you see, James, in your work, what is that work, and how can people access it? Is that something that you make clear through your podcasts, or is there an aspect of that? I mean, do you get kind of referrals from people who've been touched by and affected by what they hear, and as Timmy mentioned, then reach out?
So my work and my podcast are totally unrelated, although they're on similar topics. But I do get a lot of people contacting me on Facebook. I don't advise doing that, to be honest with you, because, you know, it's personal. But people can access me through Cool Mind Cork. If they just Google that, you'll get the information. But we provide a drug and alcohol service in Cork City South, so city centre and everything south of the river. And then I have colleagues working in rurally in East, West and North Cork as well. So if people want to access me through your radio show, I'll give you my work number and they can contact me through there. But we provide one-to-one work, group work, case management, key working, and we link in with other support services as well. So we'd be happy to help out in any way we can, and we're based in town.
Magic. Well, I hope Change the Conversation goes really well in the Opera House with Pat Falvey on the 12th of February, which may well be past by the time people see this. Timmy, if we still have you, I'd like to finish the question. I'd like to ask both of you, what was the thing that brought you to, what was the first step on the journey towards recovery for each of you, and how, you know, grateful are you of that? Maybe go with you there, Timmy, first. What was the thing that put you on that road? Because I mean, I remember in the podcast what was the sort of the lowest point, and it was a low point. Who was you? Was the paint drops on the ground? Was that you, Timmy, in the prison cell on St. Stephen's Day? Goodness me, that's definitely
and
low point.
The lowest point for me was the people that were in my life at the time who I believed would always be there no matter what I'd done, were actually after saying, "Oh look, we can't do this no more. You'll have to leave. We can't put up with it. You know, your behaviours are chaotic. We're afraid somebody's going to get badly hurt, or ourselves. The violence, the anger, the rage, the crime, the drugs." And I just remember at one point in my life, it was the first time I really, really felt alone. And it was a really, really in-depth feeling of loneliness that just swept over me. And I just remember between that incident in the cell and this other incident where I was just walking around the streets and I'd actually nowhere to go that night, you know. Nobody was answering their phone to me, you know, so I could sleep on a couch or anything like that. And guards were looking for me. My partner, who's now my wife, Nicole, she had enough of me because of the shit I was after doing to her. And it was between that feeling of loneliness and that spiritual awake experience that I had inside that cell. They really, really pushed me into saying, something has to give here, you have to do something. So I went to my doctor. My doctor put me on antidepressants because I was coming down off a lot of drugs at the time. And I managed to get myself a counsellor and I spoke with them. And then I managed to get into a pre-treatment for Table Lodge. All during periods, like I still wanted to go using, like I still wanted to fucking get away from the torture that was going on in my head. But I loved my wife and my kids, you know, I loved them in some way that I still don't understand today because I was so self-centered at the time. I only really genuinely cared about myself and where I was getting my next drink or drug or where I was getting more money to buy drink or drugs or go gambling with. I just had something had to change and I was willing to give it up for a period of time. But when I went into Table Lodge, then a month after I stopped using alcohol and drugs, I thought I was going in there for an NCT test and I'd be fixed, where I'd be able to go back out and drink manageably with my wife and come home at 11 o'clock and go to bed. But when I was in there, I started to understand that there was something different wrong with me, that I just could not stop using alcohol or drugs. And it was at that point that I started going through the honeymoon period of early recovery. Everything was good, it was grand, you know. But the real work started then when I went into prison. I was in treatment in February 2012. I went into prison in early March 2012. I was able to rekindle my relationship with my partner at the time, Nicole, who was now my wife. And that also helped massively, because if that didn't work out and I went into prison, I probably would have had nothing in my life to really fight for, to give up the alcohol, the drugs, the criminality. But because she was seeing something in me and was willing to give me a chance, I kept going. I stayed away from drugs. Then I kept going to the school. I connected with the educational, I connected with the psychologist in the prison. I connected with the drug counsellor. I done all the self-help groups, all the personal growth groups. I done everything I possibly could to help me to understand life a little bit better and understand me and understand why I felt the way I did. These are all aspects of my life that I really didn't understand previous to that. So they were all different steps, baby steps that I took to get some form of structure in my life where it was all about growing, and that's recovery. The recovery for me is not about just being away from alcohol and drugs. It's about recovering from trauma. It's about recovering, understanding yourself, getting to know yourself, looking in the mirror instead of asking yourself, who am I? Who are you? And just saying to yourself, do you know what? You're doing your best you can in every given day. And you know what? I actually love you. Do you know what? I love you because you deserve to be loved, you know, and you need to be loved. But I started to work on myself then, and slowly but surely I started to reconnect with my true self, which was that real young child, the innocent child that never ever done anything to anybody until certain things happened in his own life, and he had to build up different forms of mechanisms in his life to be able to protect himself from people who were doing different stuff to him as a young child. And that's it. It's about going back into that person, where that young child, where there's no judgment on anybody. It's just love. It's complete vulnerability, you know. And that's what we all want to be. We all want to reconnect with that thing, and it's about reconnecting that. And it's about jumping into cold water when our heads are telling us not to be, because we'll be vulnerable. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being around the right people, Dave, and feeling that you will be safe if you're going to be vulnerable. It's about doing the things that your mind and your ego doesn't want you to do. And that's what it's about. It's about recovering from all these things that stopped us from being who we were truly meant to be as from the beginning. And that's what the whole process of recovery is for me. It's not about stopping and drinking and alcohol, and it's about recovery and reconnection with that child that's down there, you know.
You're some powerful speaker, Timmy Long, boy. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. It really is. That's very strong stuff, and thank you. James, I'll hand over to you on that one. And again, gents, thank you for your time, and I hope it goes really well on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you asked about what's the first step to recovery, or like.
Yeah, the thing you did that just began that little pull on the rope. That's there you go, Pat Falvey image there for you.
Yeah, exactly. But I always talk about, you know, the last overdose I had, you know, where I was found by somebody that called the guards, and the guards, you know, showed a bit of concern. You know, but for me, really, it's around accepting that what you're doing is you can no longer do it, I suppose. Like, for years I've tried to be in recovery. I went to treatment a few times. I tried to get well in prison, but I always fell flat on my face because I never really accepted that I was somebody that had an addiction. So I would try, when I get out now, I won't drink vodka, I'll drink Bud. I won't drink whiskey, I'll drink cider. I won't take Rohypnol, I'll take Valium. I won't smoke heroin. I won't inject heroin, I'll smoke it. You know, I won't take heroin, I'll take cocaine. You know, these, like, I'll only have a joint, I won't take tablets. You know, I'll try speed and that ecstasy, but it was never like the idea that you could actually have to stop everything, you know. And it took me a lot of trying over the years different ways and means of using. That's how it's described in recovery, finding different ways and means of using until you exhaust every avenue. And eventually, when I was 27, 28, eventually I tried everything, and it always ended up back on the hard drugs, always ended up back in prisons and courts and street drug use and overdose. And eventually, with a bit of maturity, I just was able to accept. I said, you know what, it's game over. I can't do this no more. I have to try everything. And that's surrender. And it's not surrender as in like you're weak and you're giving up. It's surrendering to the fact that you just have to surrender that it's not working for you and things have to change. And I'll be honest with you, I always had an obsession to use drugs. You know, as soon as I started experimenting my teens, all right up to the end, it was always an obsession. Even when I was trying to give up drugs and trying to stay away from drugs, I always wanted. It was always in the back. I always felt like it was a relapse waiting to happen. I always, you know, had reservations around like, or do I really think I'm going to be drug free or alcohol free? You know, but since I come into recovery this time around, that obsession has been taken from me. I don't know, is it spiritually, because I have a spiritual side now, and I believe that there's, I don't know, I believe that if I'm a good person and I work hard enough and I be nice to people and I try to be good, just helpful, I believe that good things will come my way for it. And I'll be honest with you, they are coming my way, and they have since I got that into my head when I was about 28. And that obsession for me to use is gone. And I feel blessed really, because some people, they have that obsession forever, do you know what I mean? And they'll be in and out and in and out. But I don't want to use today. Do I think about using? I do. The drugs will always be appealing because the drugs work for a period of time. If you're under stress, like I'm in the middle of moving home. So I bought a house last week. I'm in the middle of moving home. The most stressful thing in the world. And I think I said it to Timmy or my wife Gillian the other day. I said, do you know what's the mad thing about this? Do you know what will fix this? All this stress and problems. Do you know, one Valium, gone. Do you know what I mean? So then the head is like, you're thinking about Valium then, and you're fantasizing about just follow up, you know, more coping skills today. I have stuff in the bank in terms of, the bank is a metaphor for, even in early recovery when times was good for me, I still did my 12 steps, my counselling, my group work, psychotherapy, all these things, right? When the times were good. Because eventually, no matter who you are, you will run into a brick wall where life gets really hard. And I have a lot of stuff in the bank saved that I tap into in terms of my coping skills. So when times get tough and stressful, I'm not running for the pub or the off license or the dealer. I have different coping skills that I've built up over time with the help of some good people. So I suppose first step is just accepting that you can't do it on your own, that you have a problem, and then pick up the phone. And that's how it always starts. You get momentum a day at a time, and before you know it, you'll be highlighting the Opera House with your podcast.
At the same time as you're moving house. Good on you.
Yeah.
And Camille, thank you very much for joining me. And Timmy, geez, you were out and about and everything. Fair play to you for jumping on and doing that for as long as you have. James Leonard, Timmy Long of the Two Norries podcast. Much success to the both of you. And we'll chat again. Definitely chat again. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
On the ball, Dave. Thanks a million, mate.